For over 40 years, Upfront has become the go-to squad-level card game for players seeking fast, exciting combat. The 501 City Fightin' 4 option is perhaps the ultimate expression of how versatile this series can be. Upfront continues to enjoy considerable interest, including tournaments, which is ideal for the game. And while it does boast a solid solitaire system, it is the two-player tournament play where the game really shines. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the 501 City Fightin' 4 scenario, a design-your-own-forces version that is well-suited for tournament play. Instead of bringing the basic scenarios with the recommended forces, the 501 City Fightin' 4 allows you to create your own forces. Using the City Fight scenario, the point value of the forces that can be used is increased to 501. You can spend the entire 501 points on soldiers, infantry guns, mortars, machine guns, tanks, and specialty equipment. But what makes the design your own even more interesting is that you can reduce the point cost by bringing in your forces into the latter stages of the battle. The battle proceeds through 4 decks, which means that the forces brought in during Deck 2 are reduced in cost by 20%. Deck 3 reduces the cost by half, and Deck 4 by 80% of the original value. The ability to bring in more soldiers, equipment, and tanks at a reduced cost opens the possibilities for what you can include in designing your own forces. It is the ability to create your own squads in Upfront that carries the greatest appeal. By adding the ability to design your own forces, you add virtually infinite variety to the game. You and a group of friends, or even just one opponent, can create your own forces for the City Fight scenario, resulting in a series of battles in which you can adjust over time to create new forces for another round. You can even use a solitaire system to create opposing forces and test them in battle. Just like in boxing, where styles make fights, so too do the different nations of Upfront bring their own unique style. Understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each nation will help you match the troops, equipment, and approach in battle. What follows are 7 videos that cover each nationality for the 501 City Fightin' 4 scenario. Each video provides insight culled from the original source, The General, Volume 26, Issue Number 5. For those who engage in 501 City Fightin' 4 scenario, the American forces present special challenges along with considerable opportunities. The American soldiers in Upfront are an interesting bunch, to say the least. They are blessed with having a 6-card hand, good numbers on the ground, and a wide range of options in terms of weapons and equipment. A typical American line squad offers a 6-card hand with 2 discards if no actions are taken, and they also break when 51% casualties are reached. If the American is playing against the Japanese, all American soldiers are considered Marines. This means a minimum morale of 2 with a minimum panic level of 3 for all soldiers. Keep in mind that before 1943, all Marines are armed with bolt-action rifles instead of semi-automatic rifles. On the surface, the Americans seem to have considerable attributes and weaknesses no worse than any other nation. For example, with their panic levels being 2 greater than the morale, it makes the Yanks more difficult to rout. However, it is the morale of the soldiers inside most of the tanks and vehicles that is lower than the average compared to most other nations. With one exception, all tank crews have a morale no higher than 4. Plus, the M4 Sherman and M24 Chaffee have good cross-country performance, but weaker armor as they are medium tanks. Another issue is the relatively low morale of soldiers with machine pistols, which makes assaulting and holding buildings a difficult endeavor. Therefore, the American player who wants to maximize their chances at winning will need to forego the traditional high-morale maneuver group and look elsewhere. As suggested in The General, Volume Number 26, Issue Number 5, the American squad forgoes armor and instead concentrates on firepower and artillery. Group A extends the line with Crane and Smith trying to avoid getting routed. Group B features Nixon on the medium machine gun, supported by Corporal Hull, Burke, Greenwood, and McElroy. The meat of the squad shows up in Deck 2 with Myers, Coggins, and Towle, who is armed with a bazooka. Sergeant Allen also arrives and has a radio to call in an artillery strike. This maneuver group can move forward to gain victory points, but the real element is the 1-2 punch of the artillery barrage, followed by a medium machine gun mopping up the survivors. Finally, Deck 3 brings in Deggy and Shelley, who crew the mortar. This helps to burn away unwanted fire cards and bring the squad in at 500.5 points. You should explore all options when playing the Americans in 501 City Fight in 4. The 501 City Fight in 4 represents a considerable challenge for all those who decide to build their own squad. The Germans provide some interesting opportunities for creating an effective city fighting unit. The Germans are perhaps the least flexible nation to play, yet they are arguably quite powerful thanks to their good morale, excellent equipment, and especially their ability to continually reload their hands thanks to their discard ability. When playing the standard German line forces, the hand capacity is 5 with 1 discard allowed regardless of the number of actions that are taken. Plus, the break point for the German squad is 51%, which means that when the German player loses exactly 1/2 of their soldiers, one more that breaks or gets killed will end the game. If there is one common theme with the options for the German player, it is how expensive their weapons tend to be. The medium machine gun costs 129 points, making it the most expensive in the game. The light machine gun is not only considerably less expensive, it is also an excellent value. The same expense goes into tanks. The massive King Tiger is a whopping 656 points, making it impossible to start the game with. By Deck 4, the cost is still an impressive 131.2 points. One interesting choice is the Panzer Kampfwagen No. 3, armed with a flamethrower. It is the only flamethrower that can be employed at relative range 4. Because of the German discard capacity, the mortar is not as valuable compared to the American or French, who have discard limitations. In some ways, the very attributes that the German side offers makes them more challenging to create a wide variety of squads. However, one interesting squad choice, as suggested in The General, Volume No. 26, Issue No. 5, starts with Posner and Hamblin in Group A. Their only purpose is to extend the front while hiding from the enemy. Group B offers a light machine gun operated by Grease, with Corporal Steiner as part of the crew. They are joined by 4 rifle-armed soldiers, which includes the low morale Beck, but that helps keep the costs down. Group C is the maneuver group, led by Sergeant Dettinger, who is joined by Hauptmann, Kubler, and Volka. The Stug 3 arrives in Deck 3 and cost 180.5 points. The entire squad cost 500.5 points, just getting in under the 501 limits. Of course, this squad is just a suggestion as a starting point. Once you have played a few games, you can make your own choices as to which German soldiers make for the perfect city fighting bunch. Of all the countries represented in the upfront system, Japan may be the most fascinating, certainly one of the most unique countries to play in the City Fight 501 and 4 scenarios. Many may imagine Japanese soldiers fighting in the jungles of the South Pacific, but it should be recognized that they had years of experience in urban warfare thanks to the Second Sino-Japanese War. The high morale, infiltration advantage, and the use of demolition charges, along with the anti-tank mine, are clear bonuses for the Japanese. However, it does seem that for every one advantage that the Japanese side offers, there is an equal disadvantage that brings them back to earth. The 75% breaking point, meaning it will take at least 3 out of 4 soldiers in a squad plus 1 more, is quite the advantage. You can safely fill out your squad with lower morale soldiers to gain a firepower advantage. However, this is offset somewhat by the rather low panic values, which means that the soldiers are not keeping their heads down. The Japanese do not have a bazooka per se, but they do have one of the best anti-tank rifles in the game. At relative range 3 or closer, a hit means a good chance at knocking out an enemy tank. It does help that Rule 30.6 makes such hits more potent, which provides real advantages for the anti-tank rifle. You can choose from many different setups. The one recommended in the general divides the Japanese forces into 3 groups. Group A consists of a soldier and another soldier armed with a mortar. Their job is to find cover quickly and burn excess fire cards. Group B is the fire base, consisting of 8 Japanese soldiers, 7 of whom are armed with rifles. The 8th has an anti-tank rifle just in case. There is no medium machine gun. Group C is the maneuver group, consisting of High Morale Shiburo and Sergeant Okimoto, who is carrying a demolition charge. Their high morale and the Japanese infiltration rule makes them quite deadly. During Deck 2, 5 high morale riflemen enter the game with Kobayashi carrying the anti-tank mine, while Corporal Togo carries a Radio 5 card to call in for artillery support. Deck 3 brings a somewhat fragile but very cheap Type 1 SP. All things considered, the Japanese bring in considerable numbers in Decks 2 and 3. One thing to keep in mind is that the urban fighting of American forces against the Japanese normally involve the U.S. Army, not the Marines. Japan offers a myriad of advantages along with challenges for those dedicated to playing City Fight 501 in 4. The reputation of the Thin Red Line followed the British into World War II long after they stopped wearing the red uniforms. Often outnumbered, the British made up for lack of numbers in most battles with their superior firepower. For the 501 City Fight in 4, the British offer considerable advantages and challenges. The British possess a 5-card hand with 2 discards if no actions are taken. The main advantages that the British possess in up front is adding 1 point of firepower to their attack if they have at least 1 usable point of firepower that is present. If the British have any real issues, it's the lack of armor at cheap prices even in the 4th deck. The Churchill is quite potent, but also quite expensive at 235.5 points when arriving in the last deck. What follows is the squad that is recommended in The General Volume 26, Issue Number 5 for starting out. Feel free to make changes that better suit your style of play and the opponents that you face. Group A consists of Corporal Burns, accompanying Vane, who is armed with a flamethrower. This helps secure one flank as the duo advances into favorable terrain. Group B carries the heavy firepower of a medium machine gun that Palmer operates with the assistance of Tresham. Here, the goal is to secure some valuable terrain, such as a hill or along the baseline. Oldeker carries the anti-tank rifle, which is more potent compared to the Piat. He protects the machine gun crew in case the enemy tank gets too close. Group C is the maneuver group, led by Sergeant Vasey, along with Shaw and Shannon, who are also armed with submachine guns. Davis carries that Piat, which is not as reliable as the anti-tank rifle, but is better suited for close ranges. After all, submachine guns are no match for a tank. Deck 4 heralds the arrival of the Sexton, a potent armored fighting vehicle that comes in quite cheap at just 65.8 points in the final deck. The goal is rather obvious. The medium machine gun keeps enemy soldiers pinned down while the maneuver group advances toward the objective. The Sexton arrives in Deck 4 to save the day if needed. The most obvious weakness is the lack of numbers for the British side. It will not take more than one bad roll of the dice to wipe out a considerable number of their soldiers. The medium machine gun is the most vulnerable. If the British lose that early, then the opposing side can advance rapidly. But the advantage in firepower, along with the arrival of the Sexton, makes this side rather intriguing, and that is why 501 City Fight in 4 is such a good scenario to experiment with your British forces. During the days of Caesar, the Roman Empire was feared across the Western world. However, by the 20th century, Italy was a mere shadow of its former self. Creating an effective squad for 501 City Fight in 4 is no easy task with the Italian forces. but it does make for an interesting experiment. "501 City Fight in 4 presents unique challenges to all 7 nations in the upfront system. Perhaps no nation has a greater challenge than the Italians. The low morale, panic values, and breaking at just 40% means that if your soldiers haven't run from the field after the first good hit, they will not be far from that point. It does not help that the Italians have a 4-card hand with 2 discards if no actions are taken. Holding on to valuable cards such as the rally is difficult even under the best of circumstances. On the positive side, the Italian soldiers are cheap, but you do get what you pay for. Filling the ranks with soldiers of 1 or 2 morale may only turn the flight from the front into a stampede. And because Italian rifles are not effective at relative range 1, the Allied player can bide his time firing at long range until most of the Italians are pinned or have fled. Adding to the issues facing the Italians is the higher chance of a malfunctioning light or medium machine gun, along with the lack of a bazooka. Toss in the low morale of the flamethrower and light machine gun operator, which may have them fleeing to the rear along with your other low morale soldiers. But all may not be lost. What follows is the recommended squad from the General magazine that gives your Italian soldiers a fighting chance. Group A features 9 soldiers under Corporal Ferrio, who helps the medium machine gun. The group is accompanied by Rotondo, who sports the anti-tank rifle. Group B features the 47mm ATG M35, a Morale 5 infantry gun that is hardier compared to most of his compatriots. Group C is really another fire base of 5 soldiers under Sergeant Capone. Capitano handles the light machine gun, and a Radio 7 is present to call down some artillery fire. Deck 3 brings in the L3, LFFT at a mere 60 points. If the rest of the Italian squad can hang on, this may be able to further stabilize the front. All things considered, if this squad still looks too weak to you, then you may want to consider purchasing elite troops. They have a higher morale and breaking point, but it does come at a higher cost. For those of you who choose a real challenge in their 501 City Fight in 4 battles, the Italians may be at the top of the list. If you win, you will have definitely earned it. Although the French exit from the war was earlier than any other nation represented in Up Front, their soldiers were certainly tough and brave as depicted in the game. However, they also have issues which makes them a challenge for anyone to play and win in the 501 City Fight in 4 scenario. While the French soldiers are reasonably tough in terms of morale and panic values, it is the lack of equipment that does not help them win in an urban environment. The lack of a bazooka, machine pistol, anti-tank mines, and even an anti-tank rifle makes them highly vulnerable to an armored attack. But what may be the biggest challenge is that the 6-card hand they use has only 1 discard if no action is taken. When combined with a number of cards that may be useless, this presents a real challenge to the French player. But the French are not completely helpless. They do have good morale and panic values, along with some advantages that include an inexpensive flamethrower, a solid mortar, and arguably the best infantry gun in the game. Of the 2 squads suggested in the general article, the first one takes advantage of the outstanding infantry gun that the French have in their ranks. Group A consists of 2 low morale soldiers. Their sole duty is to burn unwanted movement and terrain cards. Group B is a 75mm MLE-19, a powerful infantry gun that possesses considerable firepower, enough to burst through any armored vehicle. Group C is the maneuver group, even though it lacks machine pistols. This group consists of 8 soldiers, led by Sergeant Petru. The flamethrower is more for defense than attack. The maneuver group stands little chance of reaching relative range 5, but instead is focused on moving to relative range 2 or perhaps 3. The goal is to win by aggressive action victory points. The French are certainly not the easiest nation to play in up front. Their limited discard capacity combined with a limited type of weapons makes them challenging, but not impossible to play. The Russian side and up front may be one of the most interesting to play. While they have a limited hand capacity, it also offers many inexpensive options to win 501 City Fight in 4. The Russians offer considerable flexibility thanks to their unmatched discard capacity. They also feature solid tanks and vehicles, good morale, and the ability to go berserk when face-to-face with the enemy. The Russian line soldiers have a 4-card hand. They may discard up to their entire hand if they take no action this turn. A Russian group may make an entrenchment attempt, but each attempt will reduce their discard capacity by a single card. One unique feature of the Russian side is the Commissar. A Commissar may be used instead of a squad leader or assistant squad leader. They must start with the largest group and may increase their morale and pin factor by 1. However, if the Commissar is unpinned and in a group with pinned soldiers, then the pinned soldiers may be executed. Draw a random position card. If it indicates the position of a pinned man, he is executed on the spot. And just to add more fuel to the fire, the Commissar may never be voluntarily eliminated. If there is a limitation, it is the lack of a solid anti-tank weapon for the Russians. In this regard, having a decent tank would probably be a better option. While the Su-85 is a popular choice, it lacks a machine gun which limits its use, especially when trying to face down a horde of enemy soldiers. The T-28C seems like an odd alternative, but does offer both a machine gun and a low purchase price that makes it perfect for the city fight scenario. There are 3 suggestions given in The General, Volume 26, Number 5. However, the second squad mentioned offers considerable promise while also being relatively easy to run. Group A is a 2-man group that operates a mortar, which is great for pinning down enemy troops. Group B features a fire base with Semenov operating the medium machine gun. This 7-man group also boasts Commissar Dotsky to help bolster the morale or at least keep the soldiers in their place. At the beginning of Deck 2, Sergeant Zornin arrives, packing a demo charge. Plus, he has 3 riflemen and 1 soldier armed with a flamethrower. This is the maneuver group that fulfills the victory conditions. Finally, the T-28C arrives in Deck 3. With half the game left, the tank can roll forward to seal victory or stay back and attempt to break the enemy squad. And that is but one suggestion of the many possibilities in 501 City Fight in 4 when playing the Russian side. Thanks for watching. Check out more videos on the Upfront series when you visit our Seek Out and Play YouTube channel. Plus, you can keep up with the latest news by visiting our Facebook and Twitter pages. And if you want to support the channel, we have a link to our Patreon page below. And I will see you next Wednesday.